We're live.
All right. Good afternoon. This is the meeting of the Sweetwater Union High School District Board Audit and Finance Subcommittee. I'm Paula Hall. I'm chair of the committee. I'm also the vice president of the school board, and I'm glad to see everyone here on the call. We'll go through introductions today. I do have to say that our community members, one of them will be late today, not here until around 5 o'clock or a little after. And the other one is just reappointed. Dan Gutowski was reappointed in June to come back onto the subcommittee because we did revise our bylaws at the last subcommittee meeting to enable a 2-year term for those community members. And so we're really glad that he'll be back with us. And I'm going to allow everyone to introduce themselves, starting with in the popcorn style, so I'm sure everyone here knows what that means. I'm going to popcorn over to my fellow board member, Nicholas Segura.
Thank you, Chair and Vice President Hall. Nicholas Segura here, and I'll popcorn over to our superintendent.
Thank you, Trustee Segura. Moises Aguirre, superintendent, and I'll popcorn it over to our CFO, Dr. Jenny Salkeld.
Hi there, this is Jenny Salkeld. Good afternoon, Chief Financial Officer, and I'm going to hand over to the management team for fiscal services. So I'll hand over to Athena.
Hello, everyone. I'm Athena Corals, the Debt Finance Manager, and I'm going to popcorn over to Carolina.
I'm Carolina Zimmerman, and I am the Senior Executive Assistant here in Fiscal Services and helping to support the Audit Subcommittee. And I will popcorn it over to Vanessa Garcia, our payroll manager.
Thank you, Carolina. This is Vanessa Garcia, payroll manager. It looks like we also have Nancy Piccone.
Nancy, you have to unmute yourself and introduce yourself. So Nancy, if you're there, go ahead.
Sorry, this is Nancy Piccone, Director of Fiscal Services, and I will popcorn it over to our accounting manager.
Good afternoon. I am Liz Reyes, and I am the accounting manager. And do you have all of us already, Jenny? I think so.
I think we've got Dawn. But yeah.
Oh, Dawn, yes. So I will popcorn it over to Dawn.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Don Prince. I'm the purchasing manager here at the district. And I think that wraps it up for this end of the department. Did I miss anybody, Jenny?
Nope, you've got everybody.
All right. So I see that we have Dr. Alvarez. You want to introduce your team next?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ana Maria Alvarez, the Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning. I'm going to have Miss Griselda Delgado introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Director of State and Federal Programs for the Sweetwater Union High School District. I'm glad to be here.
Welcome, everyone. All right, Dr. Salkeld. I see we have Robert Hughes here.
Yeah, I was going to say we've got our internal audit team, and yes, Mr. Hughes as well as compliance. So maybe I can start with Mr. Hughes.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Hughes, the Chief Compliance Officer, and I'll turn it over to my partner for the fraud hotline, Internal Auditor Daphne Enriquez.
Hi, good evening. Daphne Enriquez, Internal Auditor, and I'll hand it over to Gerardo Moreno.
Gerardo, are you there?
Sorry, he's having difficulty unmuting right now, but he is present.
All right, well, we're glad he's there, and it's good to see everyone. Now we'll go to is that everyone from the district that has been introduced?
Trustee Hall, we still have the facilities and operations team here with us.
Okay, let's go with them next.
Ms. Quirk.
Hi there, Janaea Quirk, Chief Facilities and Operations, and I'll tag it off to Jason Brust.
I am Jason Brush, Director of Planning and Construction, and I'll pass it to Eric Spann.
Hi, I'm Eric Spann, Director of Nutrition Services for Sweetwater Union High School District. And I will pass it off to, I'm trying, I can't see everybody. So do we have our transportation director?
Eric,
Yes.
phone a friend. I think we have
Yes,
Ms.
phone friend.
Nadesh Johnson.
Yes. I'll
Thank
pass
you,
it on
Dr.
to
Gita.
Nadesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gita. Good afternoon, everyone. Nadej Johnson, Director of Grants and Communications.
Thank you. Glad to have everyone here. Is there a Tom Jockel on the call, or is that just
Oh, it's Tori, and she's part of our audit team, our Crow audit teams. Maybe we
all
can,
right? So
we can
are we
popcorn it.
ready to we're ready to throw it over to Kevin Smith from Crow and his team. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Kevin Smith. I am the engagement partner for Crow, and I will popcorn over to Elizabeth.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Saw. I'm a senior manager with the financial side of the audit, and I'll popcorn over to Charles.
Yeah, hi, Charles Ribley, Senior Manager with Crow, responsible for the general obligation bonds audits. And I guess I'll go ahead and pass the popcorn, whatever, over to Tori.
Thanks, Charles. My name is Tori Jockel, and I'm a senior staff with Crow. And that is all of us.
All right. I'm really glad to see everyone this afternoon. I think if you don't mind and you just kind of bear with me a little bit, because our community members aren't here, I don't know if we have do we have a quorum enough to conduct business? I don't know, but I was just going to go ahead and go with first, if that's all right with Kevin and his team and Dr. Sakeld and Dr. Aguirre, if we just go with C4 to start with, which is the appointment of our chair. We do annually appoint a chair. And as we discussed in the past year, I think about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, I think that our team our board member, Arturo Solis, at that time was on the committee, and he really wanted to have a board member chair this committee. So that's why we go with one of the board members as the chair of this committee. And so it will be either Nicholas Segura or myself.
So Chair Hall, I nominate you for chair of the committee.
All right. I don't mind continuing as chair for this remainder of this year. So I appreciate that nomination, Nicholas. Mr. Segura. All right, so that's we're going to take that as a yes, done deal. Okay. I was thinking that we could approve the minutes also and try to go with that, but I won't do that anymore because 5 o'clock is 45 minutes from now, so we obviously won't be able to delay that long for the Crow team to do their part. So Dr. Sakeld, I'll turn it over to you to move on item C1. Oh, wait, first we have to ask about public comment.
Right.
That's it. Are there any public comments, Carolina?
No, there are no public comments.
All right, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So Dr. Sakeld, C1, it's all you.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. So for we have the Crow audit team here with us today. They're going to be providing an update on some of the interim work that's already been conducted in May, specifically at our school sites where we had ASB and some of the attendance work. Also, they're going to highlight some of the interim work that will be done in early August. and then also in October. So they're going to be providing an update on what areas that they have completed thus far, any observations, any feedback in general, not only with our district-wide financial audit, but also our bond financial audit and performance audit. And then they're also doing some school facility program audits as well. So I will defer to Kevin and probably Elizabeth and Charles and Tori for feedback on the work that's been done thus far.
Great. And I will rely very heavily upon the 3 team members that you mentioned, Dr. Sockeld. Just as a quick reminder, and Dr. Sockeld teed it up very, very nicely. We have been engaged to perform the financial statement audit, as well as the single audit or the grant compliance, as well as the bond performance audit and the SPD audits that she had referred to, which are the only kind of new scope items. Those are required by the state of California, relatively small, but we have incorporated those into our overall audit plan. As Dr. Sockeld mentioned, we have already begun work in May, and we'll outline the areas that we have already tested, as well as any potential findings that we've identified. I'm gonna sneak away and run Elizabeth's thunder there, but we have not identified any significant concerns or deficiencies at this point as a result of our test work. Again, as you remember, in previous years, we have been delayed. Last year, due to some extremely yeoman efforts of management, we were able to get back on time from a normalized reporting process. We believe that the plan that management has put in place to close their books, as well as the plan that we have put in place from an audit engagement team, will allow us to present to you December 12th to the full board at that point in time, with communications to the audit committee prior to that, obviously. But we believe that we are back on track, both from a COVID perspective, as well as really the improvements made by management over the course of the last 36 months as it relates to the internal control structure and the ability to generate those financial statements, as well as requested documents. Our audit is designed ultimately to provide an opinion that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, as well as, again, those compliance audits that the federal funds have been spent in compliance with both federal regulations and that controls were in place over said expenditures. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth and let her talk a little bit about what we were able to accomplish in the month of May.
Thank you, Kevin. Carolina, did you want to share that document? Are we able to do that on the?
Sure. Would you like to share, or did you want me to pull it up? I'll be happy to if you'd like.
Oh, I'd love for you to pull it up.
Of course.
You're probably being better at it. Awesome.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Perfect. It's always nice to have a visual as we talk through. Okay, like Kevin said, this is just an update on where we are, what we've accomplished so far, and where we're going. And we're really heavily focused on this memo on the financial statement audit, the state compliance audit, and the federal compliance audit, as that's the portion that's been started. The Prop 39, Propo bond audit, that work is really starting up in August. So there's not too much to update there, just that we are getting ready to start on those procedures, as well as the SFP bond audits. We have started on those. I didn't include that on this because there's not much of an update to give until we've really finished the reporting on those, because they're just of a unique nature. And so we'll go over those as we get closer to that completion of those reports, but that is definitely underway. So here's our audit timeline. You can see the May field work week, that site visit field work. We performed virtual site visits. On the second page of this, it lists out the sites that we visited, just as what was communicated to you guys back when we went over the plan in the spring. So we visited Granger, Rancho Del Rey, Southwest, Montgomery, Palomar. And then for independent study, because of the changes in the audit guide related to independent study, we are pulling samples from various sites. So it's not just going to be one particular long-term independent study program, but rather we are selecting kind of a representative sample per the audit guide across the district. So back up to the top of page 1. Thank you, Carolina. I've included a section here that says audit areas completed. So that's what has been completed and reviewed. And so when Kevin mentions that we have not come across any findings at this point in time, it's in relation to these areas. So attendance, accounting, reporting, continuation education, instructional materials, comprehensive school and safety, school accountability report card, educator effectiveness. Those are all items that are on the state compliance audit guide, and then associated student body walkthroughs or ASB walkthroughs. So we don't have any recommendations that have come out of those procedures or any state compliance findings, if you will, that have come out of those procedures. So we're starting off on a good foot. And then continuing down on the page, this is what we are getting ready to perform the week of August 10th, and actually is August 8th, and I just have a typo in there, but you get the gist. It's during that week. We will be performing our planning and risk assessments and getting ready to start on the procedures that Monday, and we will be on site with the team for the first time in a couple of years. So we're very excited about that. There's a level of efficiency and personability that comes when we're able to interact one-on-one. So we will be having a few days where we'll be on site at the district office during that week, and then wrapping up remotely on Friday. I've included the areas that we touch on. This is very much in line with what we have looked at in the past, except for we always try and bring in some elements of surprise, ask some different questions, and then like federal compliance, we don't really get to just pick and choose what we audit there. We have to follow certain scoping guidelines. So currently you can see there, we're going to be looking at the ESF, or sometimes commonly known as ESSER1, ESSER2, ESSER3, or GEAR. There's all sorts of acronyms that roll up into that program, but that's the biggest one we're looking at. And then special education program is required this year that we need to test. And so those are the two specific for your federal compliance audit we will be looking at. Potentially others, depending on how the final expenditures roll out, but those main two are the ones we are anticipating right now. And then further down the state compliance list, you can just see how long this list is. The California Audit Guide, the task force, they added in 5 or 6 new state compliance areas this year, and they didn't take any out. So normally they kind of swap out compliance areas, and they'll say, okay, well, we're going to add this one in, but we're going to retire this particular program that you don't have to audit this year. Well, they didn't take any out. They added a bunch, and then to independent study, they added a whole new listing of procedures that we had to do in the current year. So this is a little bit longer than we normally see, but your team and our team are up for the challenge, so we'll be working through that. So when we come back and meet with you guys in November, we will have, or early December, I can't remember which date it is, we will have an update for you on all of those procedures. And that's really all we have as far as where we are and where we're going. The October field work, we can touch on that more at a later meeting if you'd like, but that's really where we're going through all of the finances, the accounts payable testing, the detailed payroll testing, the actual reporting, and finishing up all those bond procedures and those reports. So
thank you very much.
Just one quick addition to everything Elizabeth said. She was completely accurate as it relates to the performance audits or the bond audit about to be getting started. Charles and I, as well as management of the district, have met with the CBOC chair. walked through our planned approach there and received any feedback that he might have had. We will be meeting with the entire committee at a later date, but similar to how we sometimes have interactions with the audit committee chair, we had a brief kind of session update with him, I believe 2 weeks, sometime 1 or 2 weeks ago, but everything is progressing very nicely there as well.
Thank you. All right, so I do have a question. Do you have any questions, Mr. Segura, before I ask mine?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask you about time and effort. I always call them time certifications, but when I use that term, sometimes people think I'm talking about instructional time. What I'm really talking about is the documentation submitted, I think, twice a year that staff completes to ensure that they are working with the programs, with students under the program umbrella of the program funding, kind of justifies the funding that they're being paid out of, we're using to pay them. Do you look at those certifications in your audit work?
We do, and it depends on what program we are testing, but it's mainly in the federal compliance realm. So with special education, usually with special education, the majority of your expenditures are payroll related, and that is definitely something that we request to look at in some form or fashion.
Okay, so when you say the special ed, is it only the federal funding that you're doing that, or is it both state and federal?
Federal funding is the only one that really provides some level of requirement for us to look at those specific time and effort certifications. I can't think of the state compliance areas where they actually ask us that to look at those particular types of reports.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that it would be both state and federal if it's a categorical or a restricted type of funding, but I was just curious if that, I could see where it isn't in your audit manual, then probably you wouldn't look at it.
Right.
All right. So I really appreciate everything you've laid out. It sounds like you've already done quite a bit of work back in May. I hope you enjoyed the weather back then. It's really kind of weird weather right now because I heard there's a hurricane down in down off the coast of Mexico brewing. So I know it's been making some really rough seas and we even had a little bit of dewy rain this morning here in IB. So yeah, but it's still
you
beautiful.
never know.
Yeah. Yes, but by October it might be a little warm. So yeah. Hopefully you guys are all doing well. I appreciate the team. Does anyone else have something to offer on your perspectives about the work you're doing? Anything that you've bumped into while you've done the work at the site visits so far?
Nothing that we've run into. I think one other thing just to highlight is I know that something that's been constantly in the works is we have met with your management team. We meet with them at least twice a month, I think, and sometimes more often depending on what's happening. But they have been keeping us apprised on the Infor implementation. We've been in the loop with that, working with them on making sure that there's they've been, picking our brain on making sure that the systems are going to be established and set up in the best possible way. And we have talked with them about some of their new systems over ASB Works. So we were able to evaluate some of that during our ASB walkthroughs, as well as the new debt book system. So we've been really pleased with a lot of the information they've been providing to us. So just to add on to the status update, just in case that was a question on your mind, that we have been in the loop. They've been keeping us informed as that's moving forward.
Elizabeth, I was going to say something very similar, and also to remind members of the committee. So in years past, there have been material weaknesses. Those have declined in severity, but they have really related to Fortunately, the system limitations embedded within the existing general ledger, that's still in effect for this year's audit. So likely there will be discussion of some type of deficiencies, but again, we will categorize those appropriately, but want to provide the context that it is still based upon the existing system limitations, and you guys are well on your way to the new implementation, but that most likely won't mitigate to a complete non-deficiency, if you will, in the current year. We're not concerned about that, as we probably said 3 audits ago. Some of these deficiencies, although management has done an incredible job of implementing manual controls and reconciliations approvals throughout the process, those system limitations still exist, and we'll continue to report that until the new system is in place.
Yes, unfortunately, it's taking longer than what we wanted or what we were originally, back several years back told at the time. But I really feel that what we're going to get is a system that is beyond, is really excellent in how we can really manage our finances and allow for not only manage them well, documentation, all the different processes, the integration of the different systems, but it will allow much more transparency. And I'm really looking forward to when that system goes live. But unfortunately, it has taken longer, but for good reason. I think we will be well served by having that delay. And as you know, we've switched vendors for that implementation process. So I think we're on good ground moving forward. So thank you for bringing that up, Kevin. I appreciate that. Dr. Aguirre.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. I just kind of wanted to echo the sentiment that it's really been a journey we've been on, and we've been able to address many of the issues here, and those that remain, I think, have really been whittled down, and it's been a collaborative process in good faith to take an honest look at the deficiencies we had and address them and kind of tackle those head on. And I just want to take this moment to appreciate kind of the progress we've made, and the fact that we're now on a regular cycle, I think, supports the work that all of our staff has been engaging in with our external auditor. So, as much as some critics like to criticize, the reality is there's been a lot of methodical work that staff and everybody on this call has undertaken. And I just want to take a moment to recognize that things take time to repair, especially when there's a deep level of rehabilitation that needs to occur. But this team has been really diligent about that work. And I just wanted to say thank you and look forward to continued progress. Because again, this work is about an ongoing cycle of improvement, because the reality is there's always things we can improve. And that's where the audit process helps us as a district become a stronger organization. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you. I thank you. I thank Kevin and his team for allowing our staff to touch base with you on different elements as best they can, because there's a limited ability for you to interact with that. But I really appreciate what you have been doing to support that. And I'm really grateful to the team for doing this work, because we definitely, it's something that we identified as, what do you call it, a goal of our team, of our board, to really put in those processes, operational expectations for the staff, but also to have the systems to support that. There's still a lot of work to do, but you can see by the work being done that we are moving in the right direction. And I really appreciate everyone's help on that, and the stellar work that is being done just to continue with the limited system we have, the effort, and really, like Dr. Aguirre said, to really point out the fact that last year we started behind, but you were able to bring it up to to bring it on schedule and timely. I think that's been wonderful work and an effort well served by everyone on this call. So thank you very much.
Trustee Hall, if I could also add real quick with the work that we're doing with Crow, we're also keeping them apprised, as you're aware, with our bond issuance that we're preparing for. So we've looped them in the items that have gone forward to the board at the end of June with setting the tax rates, and then also most recently the project list. So we've let them know because they will note that in their audit report. It's considered a subsequent event, even though it's going to be impacting the 22-23 fiscal year. They still need to note that because it's going to be within our audit window of when, because we're working towards closing the transaction on the bonds in October, and then that's at the time that they're working on their report. So we've been keeping them apprised along the way. So as things progress into next month and the following months where we have some board actions, they'll be looped in on that as well.
All right, thank you. Kevin, do you have anything to add on that note? Okay. I know that we're still very much watching the activities of our district. We're still being very cautious in many ways around how we treat our, what we do with our finances. Really, I'm glad that we have our current superintendent, Dr. Aguirre, with his knowledge and the leadership of Dr. Sockeld and the instructional leaders in our district. Really, everyone at every level is working hard to make sure we keep on this path and don't put ourselves at risk again. But we're still working that way, and I realize that the audit is a look back and not a look forward. So we appreciate everything you do and all the advice you provide, and I look forward to when we meet again in the fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, it's on you, Dr. Sockeld. Are we going on with ongoing and completed?
Yes.
I see we still have the team on. Kevin's
yes,
gone.
we do have a few folks still on. So there's a couple that's going to be the section. And then into also the internal audit. So I will have Carolina bring that table up so that we can start off with the program review items. So as you can see here, we have two of them. One of them is now complete, and we do have Janaea and Eric on if there are any questions. I know that Eric worked very closely with the auditor here. It was an administrative review of the child and adult care food program for the 21-22 fiscal year. And I know there was a lot of work there, and the summation report has been provided to the committee. And we work through with the auditor on those particular items. And so if there are any questions, I know Eric's got significant context here too, because he was working with the auditor. But that audit is now complete.
So can I ask you, is that where all these forms are at the back of this?
Right, it's the start of, that's what they consider their summation report.
CACFP.
Correct.
Those summation reports.
It goes through each of what they identified and kind of the action plan, the respective action plan for each item, which satisfied, they were pleased with the outcomes of that and the responses. And again, I'll defer to Eric if there are any other details, but that's been completed.
All right. Eric, did you have something to add on this? About the summation reports, would you like to speak to them, the ones that were included on here? I think there was several.
Was actually two what they call technical assistance findings. The first finding was that due to the meal services that we provided during the pandemic, we had an increase in revenue. And during that time, we didn't have a process in place to kind of spend down that money fast enough. So what we had to do is to do an interfund transfer to basically move the money from CACFP over to our National School Lunch Program, or Fund 13. We also created a new process during that time, which would allow us to vend the meals from the Nutrition Services Fund, or 5310, over to 5320, which is the CACFP audit form, CACFP program, so that it would cut down on our need to have to quantify the more than 3 months spending revenue plan. So we were able to create that document, get that approved through the district, through the superintendent, and also through legal. So we submitted that as a corrective action. The state agreed with that plan, and that was just a technical assistance where we just have to make sure that we run those processes to know what the funding would look like. The second point was that we missed an audit or review of a CAC, not an audit, excuse me, but a review of one of our days that we had to do a program review. And that was just to come back, do retraining with our staff on how we would actually do the training and ensure that we had met the guidelines of the number of days that the program needed to be reviewed. And so the process was completed. We did our corrective action. We held a training to ensure the staff responsible for that review, which would have been my area supervisors and myself. So we did a training on that to help basically satisfy the request from our auditor. And then also this year was the first year that the CACFP program was actually moved to a different part of California Department of Education. So it is now under the CDSS, or California Department of Social Services. So we work with a different auditor this time. And the process was actually very informative. We learned a lot about the new CDSS audit person, Mr. Treese Terrell. It was a pleasure to work with, and we completed that. And I see a hand up. So Mr. Segura, is that for me? I think you're still muted, sir.
Yes, through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you for those answers. I read through that report, and the technical assistance that you did mention, and I appreciate those answers to those questions. And I really want to say is thank you to your team for how many meals were served last year?
Yeah, I think we were close to 9 million total.
Yes.
By the time we finished the school year, so.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's just incredible amount of work and an incredible feat. And I just appreciate that, and appreciate the answers that you gave in terms of the technical assistance that you specified. So thank you for that. That's all I had, Chair Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Segura, and thank you, Eric. I did have a question. So I'm trying to understand, was it that you didn't charge the resource for obviously you had been feeding people,
correct, right? So
this was for the 2020-2021 school year,
correct,
right?
Yes.
And so the resource was not being charged, so you couldn't claim those costs against that resource, and there was a $200,000 or a $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't access those funds because of how we accounted for the money.
No, if I may.
Okay,
I'm sorry. So one of the things that both, just an understanding is, they're both federal programs. So the National School Lunch and the School Breakfast Program, and the CACFP program, or Child and Adult Care Feeding Program, both are federal programs feeding individuals on the same site, same students, but they're two different separate programs. And so each of them has a mechanism in which they don't want organizations or specifically school districts to kind of house money. And so because of that 8 million meals that we served, we had quite a bit of money and yet not enough time to try to spend down that money. And so when the CACFP audit happened, we had $2 million in account number 5320. And so a way that we could have been able to spend that money down would be to, well, first of all, the requirement is that you don't have any more than 3 months of what your expenses would be. Because we made so much money, it kind of ballooned what those expense, what that money would look like, what that expense account would be. So instead of us, and again, due to the audit, I keep saying audit, due to the pandemic, there was a lot of difficulty in getting equipment. We were basically, using all of our resources to secure food. So being able to spend that money down was really impossible. So there was a lot of districts in California and across the country also had this as a technical assistance finding because we didn't have a way to spend the money. So their recommendation, and I think it fit for us, was that the money needed to be then transferred out of the CACFP, which is the 5320 account for nutrition services, into the 5310, which is the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program. So that was a way in which we were able to kind of transfer that money because we just wouldn't have been able to meet the obligation of spending that money in that time frame. So,
and Dr. Sakeld may be able to help me with this question. They send you they provide the funding up front, and then you have to validate this expense that you do that? Or because most of the time federal funds don't get funded ahead. You claim the expenditures and then recoup the cash that way. So where you may be given an allocation of funds that you can spend, and then you would reduce or adjust your budget to increase it for the certified amount you are going to be able to get, whether or not you spend it. So you budget the amount, but you may not actually spend all that. So you reduce your budget when you figure out you're not going to be spending all that allocated funds. Is that how it works?
In this case, Trustee Hall, it's a claim. It's part of the meal claim that we do on a monthly basis. So as those claims are processed and the revenues are generated, it was that piece of it, that increase, then it's the offset of the expenditures that were sitting in another resource. So the revenue is being booked to resource 5320, and a good portion of all those expenditures to help support with the meal and the staff and all of those costs were in 50.
Is now joining.
In 5310. So it was just an alignment of ensuring that those revenues got brought over to where the expenditures were primarily at.
Right. So you didn't have like Eric noted, there wasn't the ability to fully expend what would have been
correct.
You could have spent.
Right. A lot of
because it could have been a barrier to buying the goods. I know there was some, what do you call that, where they were not able to procure certain things.
Supply chain challenges.
And a lot of those kind of challenges, and that continued through the 2021 school year.
And that's what we shared with the reviewer, correct? There's a couple of things that Eric's already identified, like some equipment and some things like that, yes, if we had been able to expend it within the timeliness of the year, but due to the supply chain issues, it's going to be spent going forward.
All right. Okay. I appreciate that very much. All right. So, and the cost for that isn't just the product, it's actually staffing time as well, and some custodial time to clean up after things. Is that all charged to these resources, or just cafeteria staff?
So if I may, our department, all the funding that we receive from the meals is used to basically support staffing, equipment, replacement equipment upkeep, all the cost centers for nutrition services, that is funded through the meals that we serve, whether it be supper, which is CACFP, or National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
All right, so I appreciate that that we got that information and good explanations. I really appreciate that. I don't think there's more questions on that topic. So if you want to go to the next one, Dr. Sakyo, unless Dr. Aguirre, I see him popping on screen. I don't know if he wanted to add anything.
No, I just wanted to again emphasize and reiterate how grateful we are to all the work that our entire nutrition services team, everything they've done during this pandemic to make those adjustments and then to continue to provide meals. And then as in the state of California, we're going to be able to move towards universal provision of meals. I think it's a fundamental piece of ensuring that students have, we're supporting them from a whole child perspective. And so I really appreciate the work that Eric and his team does.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Dr. Aguirre. I remember meeting with Senator Ben Hueso at one point during the lockdown, you know, when everybody was at home, you know, before the vaccine, and he couldn't have stressed enough how important it was to make sure we were feeding our communities. And I agree wholeheartedly. Our team went above and beyond, really, I think in some ways, life-saving activities because of their ability to get out and feed our communities, not, you know, our families. So I really appreciate everything. It was phenomenal. So thank you for drawing that attention to that. Dr. Sakyo?
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the Federal Program Monitoring Review for 22-23 fiscal year. We received a communication from the CDE. They typically do select the district every 2 years. The last review was done in early 2020, around April 2020. So they're scheduled to do their work in December. They'll be on site or going through the various, what they consider the various instruments that they look at and the criteria there for each one. There is some work that Dr. Alvarez and Ms. Delgado will be starting off, as you can see on the document, you know, doing some training, working with a lot of departments in preparation for this review process. As you can imagine, it does impact various areas where federal dollars fund, whether it's school or programs and so forth. So I will defer to Dr. Alvarez and Ms. Delgado for any of the specifics in which their work is being focused on right now and preparing for this detail. And we'll have more information. Obviously, this one noted right now as ongoing. So over the course of perhaps the next 6 months to year, as we could do the work and then, you know, do any follow-up reports and so forth, we'll keep this item on here to keep the committee apprised. But if Dr. Alvarez or Ms. Delgado want to comment on this particular review.
Sure, Dr. Salkeld. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, we went 2 years ago, we went through a pretty comprehensive FPM review, and we had very limited findings. We had one finding in adult ed that was remediated and addressed in a very expedient manner. This year, we have 3 sites that are being audited, and that will be Montgomery Middle, Montgomery High, and Castle Park High School. And then there are various instruments that will be utilized across the district in terms of the funding sources. Title I and Title II are being audited, as well as Ed Equity, CTE, Compensatory Ed, English Language Learners, and support for effective instruction. We have also SEI, academic achievement, and adjusted cohort graduation rate. And I think I missed a few, Griselda, but there are so many that we will have a comprehensive list for you so that those will be ready. Griselda and the state and federal team have set up a schedule, not only for the training, but also a weekly schedule to touch bases with the school. So there's ongoing support for the school sites as well as district departments, because district departments also have areas that they will need to provide documentation. And the state and federal team does an incredible job of providing that technical assistance, but also helping some of the teams actually upload the documents because of the massive amount of information that's required. So I'm going to ask Griselda to maybe give a little bit more specificity and thank her and her team in advance for all the work that is upcoming.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. It's always a pleasure to work with the district departments. I have gone through one FPM and it was virtual. This will be my first in person, so I'm somewhat excited, but also nervous. But I think what makes me be a little bit more calm is the great teamwork that the district and the school sites were in our last FPM. I think everybody did their piece, and if every team does their piece of the whole, once they're here, whether in person or virtually, it makes the job really easy. So I'm very excited, but we will give you updates as the months progress. The closer we get to December, I think by November, I think we maybe we can come back and let you know where we are and how we got ready in these past 3 months. But I think we're going to be good. Our goal is 0 findings. That is our goal, and we're aiming for that. And I think we can. If I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Alvarez, and thank you, Ms. Griselda Delgado. Ms. Delgado, I appreciate it. Mr. Segura, do you have any questions? If not, I've got a couple.
No, I don't. I just know that, like was mentioned, we've had a lot of focus on the FPM over the last couple of years, and I think we are super prepared. And I think having a 0 finding goal is very is a good goal, and I look forward to seeing the reports as they come through. That's all I have.
Thank you. I agree with you, Mr. Segura. I think a lot of it, I'd say, maybe a decade ago, those FPMs were done on site only. They were physically coming into the district and conducting site visits and visiting departments and examining documents that way. Several years ago, I think where you started loading up a lot of the documents. So I think that in itself eased a lot of the having the documentation uploaded before they ever come down to a school site really helped the process run much smoother. And a lot of the questions asked, were really were well served, because they helped, of course, to help districts identify issues if there are any, and to improve processes. And everything is pointed to better serve students. So it's not about getting you in trouble. It's about helping you improve where needed and recognize those things that are really well. Sometimes that can influence the state to really recommend those practices as best practices to other districts as a good example. So I'm really looking forward to your report. I think it will be well done. And probably in the spring, those visits, do you think? Did they give you a time frame for that?
Yes, they'll be here in December, from December 12th to the 16th.
Okay. Well, great.
So it's different.
Spring they'll probably be done. Okay. All right. Thank you. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So the next few items on the agenda are the fiscal review. Again, it's that kind of the categories, but we don't have anything listed there. The next one is more external audits. And as we reported at a prior committee meeting, we did have PERS do a review of the pay schedules and the pay rates. This one here is noted. We've completed and brought forward those items. We had a couple items that we brought forward to the board, but in regards to, there's a couple of aspects in working with our HR team, and I know Ms. Petrosa's on too, and then we've got Ms. Garcia on from payroll. There's two parts to it to address that component with like longevity pay as an example. We're working very closely with the County Office of Education because they need to work with us on updating files. So that's going to take a few months to do that work. The same also with on the payroll side, we're working through looking at prior pay processes and adjustments to kind of service or kind of the credits that they have and the information that they have at the PERS level. And so with that, it's going to be a significant task with both HR and payroll. In June, we took forward and working closely with our labor relations team, a short-term staff assignment to help provide additional supports because we're committed to PERS to check in with them on a monthly basis to provide them an update. We'll be doing that over the course of the next few months through December. And at that point, we'll evaluate how much work has been completed at that point for both current employee records and then also the historical records that go back to about 2015 or 16 fiscal year. So we'll continue that work collectively in our respective areas while keeping PERS apprised and using this additional support to help with that work.
Okay, thank you. I think there might be some questions on this item. Mr. Segura?
Yes, so I'm trying to find where I wrote my questions down, and I was trying to find my note and try to find my note on it. So if you give me a minute. I know. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I can ask a question while you look.
Sure.
Where it says on the finding on page A163 of the pay schedule and pay rate review, I understand that we've corrected this since this finding was made about the board not approving pay schedules. And we've had all those, we've done that, I think, more than once now, because we did it again when the raise was, this past raise went into effect, but we had done it, I bet, prior to that as well. So that probably won't be, you know, it'll be corrected if they come and look at it in the future. My question was, how does this affect us when they have a finding like that? How does that, I mean, are we penalized? Do we have some kind of penalty, or do we lose? Hopefully we won't lose this ability to have our you know, to be able to participate in PERS. I mean, I don't know how that works. Can you explain that?
Right. No, we, as you mentioned, Trustee Hall, we remedied, they needed the historical data or the pay schedules from, again, the audit went back to 2015-16 timeframe. We did bring that forward to the board as a ratification. And like you mentioned, we just, with the recent salary increases, and we do that kind of on an annual basis in preparation for the next year. And then also, as you know, whenever we have a new position that's brought forward or any change, all with that agenda item is also a salary schedule. So to address this particular item, we've kept the PERS auditor apprised. They've received copies of the agenda item, so that satisfies that requirement. There's no penalty in that regard. It just demonstrates what we've taken action to address that, and then prospectively, right? So if they were to look at things a couple years from now, we can demonstrate that those items are now included. The piece that just needs to be remedied is, or corrected, is the employee records that they identified in their data set that we need to fix prospectively. Regarding this longevity piece, or then retroactively, because there was two components to it. There was the salary schedules, and then there was the longevity accounting of that aspect on employees' pay and how it gets reported to them at the state level. So that longevity piece is what's going to take a little bit of time to address. That we need to make sure is updated and impacts, because that does impact employees. So they want to see the end result with that.
And you had to work with the County Office of Ed and their fiscal team as well?
There's two parts, yeah, because there's one with the records, working with PeopleSoft and making those corrections. That's a lot of the HR team where they're working through that. The other part is working with the retirement unit to take that historical data, make the corrections, get it updated, because the County Office of Ed is the reporting agency that remits it to the retirement agencies. So we've been working with their retirement team at the county office to get the records, make the changes, and then upload that through to the PERS system. So there's two different units we've been working with at the County Office of Ed. It's a quite an orchestrated process working with the different teams to get this accomplished.
So how could you provide the board or this committee with the periodic updates on how that's going? Like how many employees it's affected, or how far, the percentage you've completed that work on, and that time frame that you project it will take for it fully to work through that requirement?
Yes, we can definitely.
Possible?
Yeah, we'll definitely
Okay.
keep you updated, because that's why we'll keep this item here until we are completely done with that task. And that's up to that point is what we'll be providing to the PERS auditor to say, okay, this data set, how much have we accomplished? So we can definitely bring that forward to the committee as well as part of our update.
So it's 4 years worth of work, right? 4 years worth of records? The period of or is that just the records that was the period that they audited?
That was the period that they selected. So that's the retroactive piece. And then we have the prospective. And I want to say, I think with Anna and Vanessa, I think it was like about 800 employees that prospectively, that data set is also going to be updated going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the right number. It's around 800.
Okay. And can you tell me, does this affect any of our retired employees?
It could possibly, is that right, Vanessa? There could be some employees within that time frame that they may have retired, correct? That's the work that we are doing with the county office?
Yes, correct. We are going back to July 1st of 2015. So we definitely do have some retired employees within that time frame.
Okay. All right. That's what I thought, but okay, Mr. Segura.
Hi, yes, you pretty much covered everything, but I was my question was around the how if it was going to possibly affect some of our retirees, and that was answered. And so if there's if those discrepancies are found and they were underpaid or overpaid, or undercompensated or overcompensated, is a possibility, and if so, then that those funds would have to be evened up, right? My understanding.
So it'll be at PERS, right? It'll be the employee benefit. It'd be more on what the employee is eligible for. So they would receive a communication from PERS that their benefit, and right, Vanessa, in most cases would probably go up a little bit.
Correct. And yeah, their actual compensation wouldn't have changed. Their compensation that they were paid while they were working is correct. It is just affecting their, as Dr. Selka mentioned, their retirement benefit now.
Right.
Okay.
So that's key. That's the key part. I think that's a good point you brought up, Mr. Segura. So in some cases, they could be decreasing their monthly payment if they'd already retired and it was not right, or what?
It should be, if anything, it's an increase, right, Vanessa? We don't anticipate anything going down necessarily. It's a categorization, right, of that particular benefit. The pay remain the same. It's more of that categorization, that longevity pay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had with that. But I'm sure that sounds super labor intensive, so good luck to everybody.
It is. That's why we asked the board for that short-term help.
Yes, I remember. Thank you.
Okay, and then the next page, I think some of them we already covered. Oh, there was the one with the County of San Diego. It's one of their periodic reviews that they do of reimbursement, the invoices. They came back with no findings. Everything was good in regard to that particular grant with that behavioral health services. So their review was good there. The next item we do have is open. It ties to what Mr. Smith mentioned with the Crow team. It's the AB 139 extraordinary audit. We have it as ongoing because one key component of that corrective action plan was the N4 implementation. And so that's one of the remaining items that we have on there, actually the remaining item. So we'll have that there. And then the next few items are related to what the Crow team highlighted. We just have it there to recap the financial audit, the Propo, and the school facility program audit. So that way it's captured all under one document. And they touched upon that earlier.
You know, I don't know where I put my, I was trying to find my list of that, what document. I don't know, I printed out most of the agenda except for some of the, you know, the budget and the second interim pieces. And I've lost my copy of this document. But I would wonder about, on one of those tables that you had, it's either the one under the memo with the, on July 26 memo, July 26, 2021, which was the implementation, the FCMAT recommendations, ongoing, and on page 29, maybe it's internal, I don't know. But on the R9 item, it said the implementation by July 2022. And that was on R9.
Right. And that's what we had at the time when we presented to the board, right? So that particular item, it's on page 219. Yeah, Carolina's on it right there. That was when we provided that update to the board a year ago because we were anticipating having N4 implemented by that time frame. So this particular piece is deferred until we have full implementation of N4.
Right. So what are you going to do to update that document in our record?
We can work with Dr. Aguirre, to provide an update on the FCMAT report as a whole. We can update that we anticipate that for the spring of next year. I know that the board received a Friday memo because about the N4 implementation. Perhaps you could include that in the documentation in our next audit subcommittee meeting, because that would update this information that's on this. Okay, regarding the N4, sure, we can include that in there.
Okay. Because this record alone is no longer, that item is no longer correct, right? Because July 22nd is, it's not going to happen this month.
We can do that to complement that.
All right, thank you. Okay. Go ahead.
And I think that's the last item under this section before we transition to C2.
Is the 760 number, do we know who that is, or is that just?
That's Miss Pedrosa, she's calling in.
Oh, okay, good. And then we haven't seen our other committee member join in yet.
I don't see her on here yet, no.
And Trustee Hall, if I may, we got an email fairly late that indicated she was not going to be able to make it this afternoon. Ms. Schmidt.
Okay, I thought it was 5 o'clock. She was going to make it after 5, but that's fine. We'll try to work. She can watch our recording if she. That's too bad. I'm sorry we don't have our committee members, both our community members here, but it is what it is. Go ahead, Miss Dr. Sawkill.
Okay, all right, then on the next item, then Trustee Hall for financial reports, we'll look at the adopted budget. And I know for both you and Trustee Segura, you've heard the presentation when we did the adopted budget in June. What I could probably perhaps highlight is, start here with the timeline. Maybe just a brief update of, and it's kind of a preview of what we're going to be bringing forward to the board in August. As you know, we have the 45-day budget revision because when the final state enacted budget was finalized at the end of June, we had school districts bring forward any key changes from that final budget. And we'll be bringing that forward on the 8th. It's an informational item to highlight those changes, and primarily most are centered around revenues. A lot of that work is still evolving as we're getting information from School Services of California, from Capital Advisors, working closely with Kevin Gordon, and then information from the Department of Finance and even CDE because of trailer bills coming together, getting to the specifics of the numbers. One example too, we're waiting for FCMAT to release the LCFF calculator. They're the ones that typically take that data and that information from the governor's budget and then share it out with school districts. The last update we received is that they're going to distribute it the last week of July to the first week of August, which is going to come really close to our deadlines, right, to bring forward to the board on August 8th. So we've actually been working very closely. Nancy Piccone has been working very closely with our representative at the County Office of Education to factor in some of the components. And I'll have Carolina go to probably the next few slides. I think I'm just going to talk through a lot of what we brought forward to the board in June, incorporated a lot of the items associated with like the ADA percentages, 3-year rolling average, also the COVID percentage factor. So a lot of around our advocacy efforts and what we included in that budget is incorporated. One key change though, that's what we're in the process of calculating is the LCFF. At the time we brought forward the adopted budget, the add-on to the LCFF base was about 3.09% is what the county had given us. And most recently now, information we received from school services is that addition is 6.28%. So that difference is what we're in the process of calculating, making sure everything aligns to what the county's office's guidance will be. So that'll probably be a revenue increase that we will bring forward there. We're also working through, there is some perhaps increase to the special education funding. So we've reached out to our SELPA director for more information. Again, we may or may not have that in time for the 45-day budget update. If anything, it'll be definitely included in first interim. So again, a lot of folks are taking this information from the state budget and giving us as much information as we can. Another consideration, so aside from LCFF and SPED, are the block grants. Our number that we had brought forward to the board at the time, they've now kind of carved it out into 2 different type of block grants. One they're calling the learning recovery, and the other one is around musical or arts and musical, kind of like a Vapa approach. So those numbers, we just actually got estimates from school services. They've got estimates that they're using off of their website at this point. We don't have the final numbers, but it's hopefully close. The block grant for the learning pretty much is aligned to what we had brought forward to the board at about $49 million. But again, it's the use and how we can use those dollars or what's evolving based on trailer bills. And then the other on that musical or the Vapa arts grant, in essence, that's about 21 million. So that is new. We didn't have that built into the budget in June because that did come in afterwards. So again, we're also getting more information on how those dollars can be used. So those are the key areas right now that we know at this point that where things have kind of settled. But again, as we get more information. And that'll all be brought forward to the board in August.
Okay, Mr. Segura.
Yes, yeah, I didn't have any questions on that. I just wanted to make sure I understood going back to item 5, the AB 139. So I know you said we're going to get an update at the committee, but are we going to? I think it'd be a good idea if you hadn't. I just want to make sure I didn't miss it. That we are going to get, the board will get a complete update or a full update. I think it would be good on that whole item whenever we can do it in the near future, just especially as we move forward with the things we're doing and possibly selling bonds and all sorts of stuff like that. As I hope we will be able to. That makes sense, Trustee Hall.
Yes, absolutely. Are you talking about the complete status of everything on that FICMAT table that she showed and the memo from Dr. Geary dated July 2021?
I think it would be good. I don't know when's the last time we had one. Maybe I'm missing it, but I just think it would be a good idea to kind of go over that again.
Okay.
In my eyes.
All right, Dr. Geary?
Yes, we can certainly point out, I think the vast majority of those items have been completed. The outstanding at this point is really that Infor implementation, and we can definitely provide an update. One was provided, I want to say about 2 months ago, and I think that's the memo Trustee Hall was alluding to. So we can include it as part of this agenda item for a future Audit and Finance Subcommittee. And I'll work with Dr. Winters, who's been working on the implementation of Infor. There's been some progress made there, and along with Dr. Sokeld, with Ms. Pedroza and their teams. So we can definitely provide an update, either in person board presentation and or as a memo. So I think we could approach it from both a board presentation and an update memo. So I'll work with the team to get something ready to present to the board.
Thank you. All right. So do you have any questions on this presentation about the budget, Mr. Segura?
No, I do not.
Okay, so it sounds like Dr. Sokeld, we're waiting for some of the trailer bill information to fall through the sieve of regulations and guidelines, so we know better how that looks for our district. And I expect that to happen within how long? How long, Dr. Aguirre, do you think that will take?
So as you mentioned, there's a couple of layers. So one is County Office of Education. We're waiting for them to provide guidance. As you may be aware, at the state level, all the county offices of education develop what's known as a common message. So we're waiting for them to develop that common message. We're not necessarily, we're waiting for them. And then there's a CDE aspect, California Department of Education. Then the State Department of Finance also works with School Services of California. So there's all these agencies. While we're awaiting further word from them, one piece we definitely are aware of is the additional grant for Vapa, Visual and Performing Arts. So working with Dr. Alvarez, working with Mr. Culver, we're starting to put some brainstorming in place. Again, this was something that was in discussion, and we didn't know if it was going to make it into the final budget or not, and it is. So now that we know that it's there, while we wait for the final rules, we can start putting some concepts, conceptual thinking together. So at some point in the near future, perhaps in the next 2 or 3 months, we'll come forward with a plan, because I'm certain with anything involving the state, there is a plan that will be required. We'll start kind of the conceptual framework for that plan and present it to the board as it relates to Vapa, Visual and Performing Arts, because that is, again, the new piece in this budget.
So the other part of that block grant is discretionary, is that correct?
That's a separate yeah, I believe that's a COVID recovery block grant. So that's a separate grant than this Visual and Performing Arts.
Right.
And Dr. Sokol, I don't know if I have the terminology correct, but that's my understanding, is that there in essence are two separate and apart block grants.
Right,
But
correct.
there's a learning recovery, or is
That's
this
the one. Yeah,
So
they
it's-
split it into two. We had the original discretionary block when we brought in
Right.
budget adoption. And then they carved out to the learning recovery and then that VAPA grant.
Right, so the May revision had it in one pot, and the Assembly and Senate came up with something a little different, and the compromise was the two block grants.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so thank you for that. I know in some cases, some of this money is split, or some of the money and the increases, or what we hope to receive, may have been split into some other type of funding that we probably won't see any of, being that we're not an elementary school district, correct? So some of those pre-K items, early childhood, those types of funds, we will never be participating in. But the good news is the LCFF base, correct, was significantly increased as a result of many hours of advocacy from not just us, I'm sure many districts, many board of trustees, many superintendents and CFOs were pounding the doors of all our legislators, not pounding, but politely tapping on them, on their shoulders about what would work best for all districts. So I'm really glad to see that. This is something that will be ongoing, right? So it's a really significant change in our funding, which is wonderful news. I'm glad that will benefit our students moving forward because it does help us provide more stability in the fiscal sense to our district and our schools and our students and staff, and that's wonderful news. So thank you for highlighting that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Trustee Hall, if I may, I just want to also highlight that we're very coherent in our approach with where the federal and state government are headed in terms of accelerating student learning. And so just recently I read an article about the president of the federal government really encouraging districts to focus on tutoring and really kind of in-depth tutoring. So we're looking at some very strong options to really support students' acceleration of their learning. That really is where many school districts are headed after multiple conversations. That's where the current moment and the current situation really is calling for in a way that we can support our students is accelerating their learning coming out of this pandemic, which has been really, it's been a challenge. So
I think that would be a good presentation to the board to really dive into the plans on how we're supporting students in that learning recovery. Because it seems to me that anything we can provide during the regular school day would be really important because some students don't want to stay late or come in early for different types of extra tutoring. So if anything, I think however that works for everybody and whatever your best advice is and best plans, I would like to hear that. As a board member, I think it would be very well done for us to hear how about that and then to monitor it as we move forward through the year. So that'd be great. Thank you. All right, so I don't really have any questions on the budget. I know you'll bring it forward to the board again, and I would encourage our community members to also listen to the, when we have that 45-day budget review. So because that's really where we're going to land, right? When it comes to budgeting, we'll land with the 45-day budget review or budget adjustment, I guess we call it, and how that sets us up for the rest of the school year and the years in the next couple of years following. So thank you for that. So go ahead with your next item.
I think at this point, Trustee Hall, the next section, it'll be the internal audit team. We'll highlight them, Mr. Hughes.
All right.
Good afternoon. This is Gerardo. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, good. So I'm going to go over the ongoing and completed audit section. So your first couple pages is the notice about our 2-year plan. So we have gone over through some of those reports that you'll see attached. I believe they start after page 4. Page 2 is just our continuance of non-audit services. And then noted on page 6, after our last meeting that we had, we have completed 11 new reports and they're actually attached. So it starts from number 16 all the way through number 26. And again, those are included in part of the packet, and then along with its corresponding corrective action plans from either the school or the department. So if you guys have any questions on this specifically.
Thank you.
And then Daphne will talk over the corrective action plan guidelines.
Yes, if there are no questions about some of the reports that were issued, the agenda includes an item labeled Corrective Action Plan Guidelines. During the last subcommittee meeting, Trustee Hall had questions and comments about site responses provided in corrective action plans, including expectations such as who these should come from. For example, for ASB, the corrective action plan should come from the principal as a responsible party. To address this, internal audit developed these corrective action plan guidelines so that expectations were clear and managed on the front end. The guidelines are provided to a site or department at the time an internal audit report is issued and defines, as you can see on this page Carolina has pulled up, it defines a corrective action plan, why they are important, required elements such as being prepared on site letterhead, directions, and a recommendation for administrators to monitor the corrective action progress as internal audit will eventually perform a follow-up. And in the following pages, we provided an example for formatting.
I noticed that.
The next. I was also going to mention this is a transitional period to this new format, and most of the corrective action plans presented today were developed using the new guidelines, so you may notice consistency among those.
I did notice it, and I want to thank you for that because it really does look more like people really took the care and time to review the reports that you provided to them, your findings, and to respond in a manner that was really professional. I think that speaks well for the polish. It speaks well when a district does that, when staff leadership does that type of work. It's really, I think, benefits everybody. So I really appreciate that, Daphne, and thank you, and Gerardo, and everyone involved. Really appreciate it. I did read through several of these, and I understand that some of these are from a prior year findings. And there was a lot of things going on during COVID, so we do understand where there might not have been some, everything documented was really well done. I mean, well observed by our internal auditor team. Because of COVID, I think there is some understanding that things were not as well run as they could have been. But I know that by repeating this exercise with them and going back and revisiting with those different sites and departments, they'll understand it's not something that will go away. It's a requirement of how our operational expectations are set, and we expect follow through. So I appreciate everything, and I think your reports were very thorough, very well done, and I want to thank you all for that. Do you have any questions, Mr. Segura?
T. Hall, just add, so I read through some of the ASB reports and the findings and from the past, and I think a lot of it is, like you said, due to COVID and, not being able to spend down the money and plus you got to have a plan for, how to spend the money. And I know there's a lot of turnover at those every year, and, and there's continual training. So that's really all we can do is really, is offer the training and make sure that do the best we can to make sure that they're following the guidelines and supporting them as best we can.
Thank you. I want to also commend our internal audit team because of the work with the time, the instructional minutes. I think what you've done there is really key. Similarly to the ASB, setting up the parameters and really refining the documentation required and the processes required, and making sure that the principal, director, or executive of each of those divisions and departments really understand it's their role to oversee this and to ensure that staff is operating within the guidelines and properly documenting the information and following the correct processes. It's really about standardizing the operations. And I appreciate that we've moved along quite well. We're really, digging in on this. You've done a lot of work around it. A lot of work. Just looking at the ones for the state and federal programs and the student services with the instructional minutes and then the time effort certifications, really having those administrative regulations and the documentations really normalized and codified is important. And I think you've done a lot of work in that area. And I thank you for providing this information. It was a lot of information. I printed it out over the weekend, and it was quite extensive to get through, especially when with some of the backup documents for some of these departments and different activities. I think it really is good work. So thank you for that. I don't really have any questions. I think we just will keep our eye on as it moves forward and ensure that every director, every manager, every principal, assistant principal understands the processes and they're able to guide and assist staff in completing those appropriately. Really, it's about leading the staff and really encouraging them to do the right work, to do it well, because we are watching, not only us, but our public watches, and our students learn from all of it. Our examples are really key in that respect. But having the documentation really codified and in a manner that everybody operates in the same way is really, there's room for a little bit of individuality, but when it comes down to resources and how we account for them and how we ensure that we don't have to pay back money because we didn't have those proper documentation, and we're really doing the work to ensure we do money that we need to run our schools because we had the proper documentation is important. And this will help us with that. I think it'll help ensure the district is on good footing in that regard. Because in the past, we have had to repay money for lack of proper documents. So I appreciate everything you're doing. Dr. Aguirre, you look like you wanted to say something?
Thank you, Trustee Hall. No, I just wanted to chime in that Ms. Enriquez and Mr. Moreno and I have had conversations recently about, again, this work is meant to be an ongoing cycle of improvement for our system, for our district. And so the way we do that is by communicating effectively so that, regardless of who the staff is we're working with, that there's that understanding that there's an expectation of follow through and ensuring that there's that almost like a consultancy basis with the understanding of the professional standards that go along with being an internal auditor. It's a very unique role. And so with that, I think sometimes the edification, the teaching, and the learning of our own staff is important because as Trustee Segura mentioned, there is a transition that happens from year to year. So it's a continuous cycle of improvement and edification or teaching and learning to our own staff. So in a way, we're building that capacity internally because really that's how we improve the organization as a whole. And so I appreciate the approach that we're taking regardless of the department. And again, those conversations about how do we communicate as colleagues, as professionals that we all are, to understand the expectation is really important. And so I think we're all working towards that. And I think the documents and the artifacts that are being generated reflect that approach.
Yes, thank you. All right, I see Mr. Hughes. Is it Dr. Hughes? Robert, it's on you now.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It is not doctor, but we have, Daphne, are you able to pull up the quarterly report?
Sure, I think Carolina will have that available. We're actually presenting two in this agenda. One was from the March 31st period that ended, as well as for June 30th. And if we can go to the June 30th report, that's the one that summarizes activity for the year. If we scroll down to the bottom of this, it states that there was a total of 9 cases. Of those 9, 8 were closed and 1 remains open. Page 2 of this report is a table that can be referred to with more information. Most of these were.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Kathy. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say most of these were already presented, so you may already be aware of these that are listed, except for I think there's 2 new ones at the bottom.
Right, Mr. Hughes.
Turning over the mic.
Thanks.
Certainly. So if you're looking at the parts of this chart that we have not heard previously in other recorded in finance meetings, audit committee meetings, we had 1 closeout, and I do want to reiterate that both Daphne and I came to an agreement that when we came across reports that were not necessarily into the fraud hotline through the third-party service, but would be something that we would see. We have included those, even though they do not have a number from our third party. They are things that have appeared at the district with concerns by either members of the community. So we closed one of those out, which was the email stating that the person believed that a retired employee from many years ago was not a United States citizen, and they felt like that person should not be collecting a pension. We closed that out as unfounded and unsubstantiated. And then we also were able to close out at one of our middle schools, Hilltop Middle School, as not being substantiated about a school-connected organization running raffles. So those are the 2 closeouts. We do have 1 active fraud hotline report that is still, we are still interacting through the third party with the reporting party, and we hope to have in our next meeting a closeout status on that.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it that we do follow up on things and we do take it seriously. Every reported, claim of fraud, we take those seriously, and I hope that people continue to utilize the fraud hotline or other means to alert us about what they feel might be a misuse of funds or of wrong actions being taken by staff. I think that's important, even though, and I'm glad to see that none of them seem to have been really had further findings, right? Each one of them were resolved or found as not having a basis to move forward with. Daphne, you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add before we move on to the next topic that it's just so the committee is aware of the process. It is also our intent to share with you today that a draft RFP or a request for proposal is forthcoming. Internal audit is collaborating with various departments for feedback on the scope as well as for when the RFP will be released, with the plan to take it to the board in September or October. For context, the initial and current contract for the fraud hotline was awarded for 3 years with 2 additional 1-year options to renew. So altogether, there is a maximum 5-year term. The fraud hotline agreement was fully executed in January of 2018 with services to begin in February of 2018 and end in January 2021. The district elected to renew the 2 additional 1-year terms after the initial 3-year term ended. So in this current fiscal year, the district is in the 5th year of the contract, with a term date being at the end of January 2023. And the district will need to resolicit the contract since it will maximize the 5-year education code contract provision.
Right. Okay, great. That's good for you to bring up. I really appreciate the fact that we go back out. We don't just sit with the same people over and over. I think we've done that with other vendors as well, so it's a good practice. I think we're well served by doing that. So thank you, Daphne, for bringing that up. All right, so the next, the next item is our meeting minutes. I don't know if Mr. Segura, are you there? I don't need to see him. I have a copy. I think
Yes,
we both read through it.
Yes, do we need to approve those?
If you don't have any objection, then I'll just say they stand approved, right?
No objections here.
Well, you can make a motion. I don't know if I don't think we established what a quorum is for our committee, or if we need to have a quorum. So if you want to make a motion, and I'll second it.
Sure.
And we'll just,
He says I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
all right, I'll second it. Hearing no objection, the motion passes. So the last item we have is our committee member comments and the recommendations to the Board of Trustees. One of the recommendations, I believe, would be to was on the Infor implementation and the update the document in our subcommittee about the implementation of Infor timeline, and etc. And the other request from Mr. Segura was to have a presentation on the FICMAT extraordinary audit update.
Yeah, just an update would be sufficient, yes.
And then a presentation, wasn't there a third thing?
I only remember those two.
Okay, well, that's good. I thought it was something to do with the budget, but that's fine. Okay, so Carolina, did you have any other notes on what we had discussed? Was that it?
No, Chair Hall, I do not have any other notes.
Okay, great. So that's it. I think, do you have any other comments, further comments, Mr. Segura?
No, I appreciate everybody's work, and this was a lot of, I've been going through it since Friday. So, and I can't imagine what it was like to put it all together. I almost made it through all of it, but I appreciate all the work that's been put into this, and it just shows how hard the team is working on this, and how we truly, want to do the best we can in this, and all the work that's listed on our agenda. And I think we are doing our very best. That's all I have.
Thank you. I also wanted to commend staff because of the hard work they've done. I can't believe, I really believe we've come a long way. In the years that I've served on this committee, we have come a long way. It was a real push for a long time to have to get where we are now, where there's real, I think, cohesiveness on how we operate and how we, our expectations. And I think that just is really, it speaks well of our staff. It speaks well to our community about the work we do on the business side of the house. And it is only beneficial to our students, because they are assured that we're doing the right thing, and we're providing what they need to succeed in our classrooms and in life. So I think that's really want to thank each and every one on this team. We really appreciate you. Thank you. And with that, I will call the meeting over and wish everybody a good evening. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.